could make the difference on who will become the nation's next president.
Presidential debate, and Harris is first. And with election day less than 2 months away now, tonight's debate could shake up a very tight race that's already had a lot of surprise, should we say.
Harris says she is ready. She has been preparing for mock debates in Pittsburgh, complete with stage and TV lighting, along with the same stand-in for Trump that Hillary Clinton used in 2016.
Well, for his part, the former president's team says he's had less formal but extensive debate prep sessions over the weekend at his Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
Tonight's debate will be held at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia in the critical battleground state of Pennsylvania.
And like the last debate between Trump and President Biden in June, there will be no audience in the venue tonight, and the candidates' microphones will be muted while the other one is talking.
For more on what's at stake tonight, let's bring in Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker and our senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson. Hallie, first of all, latest polls showing this thing is super tied up right now.
Call it a jump ball, call it a dead heat, call it virtually deadlocked.
So does this break it up?
Yeah, pick your cliche. And that's why it's so critical tonight, because you look at the viewership, first of all, tens of millions of people may be watching. We talk about the convention being these moments for primetime, high-profile viewership. Twice as many people watched that first presidential debate when it was President Biden up against former President Trump back in June. So we are talking maybe upwards of 50 million people coming out and watching this. And about 3 in 10 Americans, according to the most recent polling, say that what happens tonight could make a difference in how their decision-making goes for the vote come November. 3 in 10 Americans also say they need to know more about Kamala Harris. Only about 1 in 10 former President Trump. So especially for the vice president tonight, it is an opportunity to tell those voters who she is, to define herself before Donald Trump does it for her.
Yeah. Do debates matter? Ask former President Biden. If they matter, think about where we were in late June. It was Biden and Trump in the race. We all know what happened in that debate. Now, the rules that were set for that debate are the rules that will govern this debate, Kristen, which we just mentioned, some of the more notable ones. The opponent's mic will be muted when the other person is speaking, no audience. Who wanted these rules and who do they benefit?
Here's the irony. President Biden, when he was at the top of the ticket, his campaign argued for these rules, for the mics cut, for no audience. Now it is Vice President Kamala Harris who is arguing to actually unmute the mics. Why? Because they say they want her to be able to interject, to fact check if needed. There's also an argument that, boy, having those mics muted allows former President Donald Trump, who sometimes likes to have some crosstalk, say some things under his breath, to look a bit more presidential. So the question tonight, I think, about optics, but also substance. Former President Trump, will he engage in personal attacks? His allies are urging him to stay focused on policy. For her part, Vice President Kamala Harris, for all the reasons that Hallie just mapped out, because so many people still say they want to know more about her. A lot of questions about how a Harris administration would differ from a Biden administration and some of those policy pivots that we saw from when she first ran for president back in 2019.
Well, as mentioned, this debate is taking place in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. It's being hosted by ABC News. We will simulcast it in its entirety. Tom Yamas is there in the so-called spin room where people can gather and the surrogates gather before and after the debate. Tom, set the scene for us.
Hey, good evening, Savannah. Yeah, we are in the spin room right here. The campaigns will burst in here, declaring their candidate won the debate. You may remember it was here in the debate spin room where Team Biden took some time to enter after that disaster. Yeah. So let's take you inside the debate hall now and show you the stage where this debate will be taking place. And so some of this. So this is your traditional one-on-one presidential debate, right? Both standing. Former Trump will be on the left side of your screen, Vice President Harris on the right side. We'll explain why in just a moment. The debate will be about 90 minutes with 2 breaks. There will be no opening statements. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer the moderator's questions, 2 minutes for rebuttals if needed, and 1 minute for follow-ups, again, if needed. Former President Trump won the virtual coin toss, so he's opted to speak last during the closing statements. That's really important. Because of that, Vice President Harris got to choose her position, which again is on the right hand of your screen. As for the rules, there are a handful of them. You've spoken about a couple of them. They are very important. Mics are muted when the other candidate is speaking. There is no audience, but there is a group of journalists observing the debate, known as the pool. There can be no interaction with staff during these breaks. The candidates will be given water, pen, a pad of paper. You can't bring props or notes. There will be a giant timer just above the timeline so they know exactly how much time they have. And you may notice another thing. The candidates are nowhere near the same height. The podiums will be slightly different. And something to look out for, the first few seconds of this debate. Here's why. This will be the first time both candidates meet each other for the first time ever, or as the kids say, Savannah and Lester, IRL.
In real life. We'll for the old folks like us at home, we'll define it. Thank you very much, Tom.
All right, Garrett Haake has been covering the Trump campaign and joins us now. Garrett, I know you had a chance to speak to the former president. What's your takeaway?
Yes, I talked to him on the phone. The former president seemed to be in a good mood. I think he was very eager to get to this stage after what I'm told was a fairly intense last couple of days of preparation, although his weeks of preparation were less structured, certainly, than what the vice president had been doing. I asked him what he thought would be the challenges of debating the vice president, and he talked to me about the fact that he believes some of her policy positions have changed in a way that makes it hard for him to know exactly what she'll defend and what she won't. His campaign's solution for that, they tell me, is basically to take whatever they think is the most liberal, the most out of the mainstream position that the vice president has ever taken in her career and argue that that's her real position, regardless of what she says on the debate stage tonight. And Lester, I say that's the plan because, as always with Donald Trump, I think there is the plan and then there is what he decides to do on the fly on the debate stage here tonight, something none of his advisors can tell us for sure.
All right, Garrett Haake, thanks very much.
I believe we're joined now by Laura Trump, who's the co-chair of the former president's campaign. She, of course, is also his daughter-in-law. Ms. Trump, good morning. Good evening. It's good to see you.
Who knows what time it is anymore?
Yep, it's like a casino. There's no clocks. Old habits are hard. It's nice to have you with us tonight. Let's pick up where Garrett just left off. A lot of advisors were told, have said to your father-in-law, behave yourself, just play it straight. Don't be the truth social Donald Trump. Be the guy that looks presidential. Is that the advice that you've given him, and do you think he'll take it?
Well, he took it on June 27th in the debate against Joe Biden. And, I think if anybody had any question, how can Donald Trump perform in a debate? That was a knockout punch. Joe Biden is no longer the nominee for the Democrats, I would say specifically because of that debate. So, look, Donald Trump knows exactly what he needs to do, Savannah. Whenever he goes into this debate this evening, this is about talking about how the American people's lives were while he was in office and how their lives are right now. And he has to make sure people are reminded that Kamala Harris has had the opportunity for nearly 4 years to do a whole host of different things. Many of them she's talked about in the past several weeks. And I think the major question is, why do you have to wait? Why aren't you doing these things now? And he has to kind of expose Kamala Harris, I think, for who she really is, because America, by and large, does not know a lot about her. She's only done, of course, one interview thus far. So I think he's going to be calm, cool, and collected. I think everybody's going to be very impressed tonight.
Laura, typically in these things, both sides will claim victory. But at the end of the day, internally, what is a home run for Donald Trump tonight?
I think it's him having the opportunity to directly engage with the American people and truly call Kamala Harris out for some of her very radical past. She has seemed to change her tune very recently on a lot of things. And it does beg the question, who is Kamala Harris and what is her plan?
She changed her tune on fracking.
What he did while he was president for 4 years and what he plans to do to rectify a lot of the damage that, quite frankly, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have caused in this country. I think that is a great success, and I think that we're going to see that happen tonight.
Well, Nikki Haley, who, of course, was a rival of your father-in-law's in the primary, said that part of the reason that Donald Trump is trailing among women voters in particular, women voters that he very much needs in order to prevail in this election, is because of the way that he and his running mate, J.D. Vance, speak to women. She said, call even a Democrat woman dumb. Republican women get their backs up too. Stick to the policies, leave all the other stuff. I mean, it's interesting because you say he knows how to be calm, cool, and collected on a debate stage. But at this point, for better or for worse,
In 2020, 43% of women voters,
he calls.
according to exit polls.
Couldn't even repeat here that he makes about his running, his opponent here. So how does that play into your concerns about this election?
Well, listen, I think Donald Trump is incredibly transparent, and I believe that that is something that's important for a leader in this country. Look, we had 3.5 years, Savannah, of people saying, what's going on with Joe Biden? And Kamala Harris was one of the many people who lied about his state. We need transparency in our leaders, and you don't have to love everything about Donald Trump. Quite frankly, he himself said, you don't even have to like me. But when you are talking about someone who is going to have the policies that's going to make life less expensive, that is going to secure our southern border, that's going to keep us safe, that is going to get us out of wars, not into wars, those are the policies that people need to hear about. And that's what I think people should be basing their vote on. And it's our job at the RNC and the campaign to relay that to
Just
people.
to be clear, I mean, that policy debate absolutely is fair game and should happen. What I'm talking about is stuff he puts on Truth Social where he calls her dumb or not that smart or not as good looking as him, or makes a sexual innuendo about how she attained her position in politics, that kind of thing.
Well, Donald Trump is very good looking. He'll be the first to tell you that. But I really ultimately think that, you know, whenever people are more focused on that than they are their everyday life, I think that's a hard thing to try and sell to people whenever they go to the grocery store and they can't buy as much for their family, or they go to fill up their gas with their gas tank and they can't fill it up as much. Ultimately, I think that elections come down to kitchen table issues. And again, you don't have to love everything about him. You might not even want to hang out with Donald Trump. But whenever you look at your life and the future for this country, you know, between these two individuals, you cannot survive 4 more years of what this country has just been through. And that is exactly what a Kamala Harris administration would be. Donald Trump's policies worked. They made life better for people all across this country. They kept us safe. And he will do it again with 4 more years in the White House.
All right. Laura Trump, thank you for being with us. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, who is helping Vice President Harris's campaign. What's the view from there?
Well, Lester, let's start with some new reporting into NBC News. According to 3 people familiar with their conversations, Kamala Harris and the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the 2016 Democratic nominee, we have learned, have spoken within the last several days, where Clinton provided Harris advice and guidance as the only other woman to debate like this one-on-one with Donald Trump in the past. Among that advice, we're told specifically that Clinton told Harris that Trump may try to bait her during the course of the conversation, as we've witnessed in the past, and specifically said that if that happens, that she should turn it back on Donald Trump himself and try to provoke him directly. One thing to keep an eye on as we anticipate these two on stage a short time from now. We're told that Clinton and Harris have spoken several times over the course of the last several months since she became the Democratic nominee. We've also been hearing from in and around the Harris preparations for this debate, telling us, among other things, that she had a series of mock debate sessions, many of them happening here in the state in Pittsburgh. In the course of that time, they had a TV lighting. They had, so she could have the real experience, and a stage on which she would stand. That she has watched some debate clips of Donald Trump in the past to prepare herself for what she may anticipate tonight. We're also hearing now from her husband. Of course, he is the second gentleman of the United States. Could be the first gentleman if he wins. Well, if she wins, well, we heard from him in the form of a tweet a short time ago where he said, in part, and I'll pull it up to read to you, Kamala, I can't wait for everyone to see you in action tonight. You've got this, and I've got you. Earlier in a separate post, he said that she is ready. He could tell it by looking into her eyes, and said that she can smell weakness and knows how to confront a coward. Her campaign, her aides are hoping that her experience as a former prosecutor will benefit her tonight, the same way that she prosecuted some of those Supreme Court nominees in the past. Brett Kavanaugh, one that becomes very readily familiar as people look back to her experiences in the Senate that she'll be able to prosecute the case against Donald Trump tonight. All things to keep an eye on as we get started here on a historic evening in Philadelphia.
All right, Peter, thank you. For more, let's bring in North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, who is a surrogate for the Harris campaign. Governor, it's good to see you. So 60% of voters, nearly 60% in a recent poll, said they want to see change. Kamala Harris is the incumbent vice president. How do you make the argument that she's a change candidate when she's been in office for 3.5 years?
Well, first, the record that she and Joe Biden have established as president and vice president are bringing change to this country with investment in high-speed internet, fighting prescription drug costs, expanding health insurance, investing in infrastructure. Those things are long generational investments that are changing America, and that's a good thing. But she's also laid out her own economic plan. She sees that people are facing higher costs. She understands childcare, unlike John, who clearly doesn't have a clue about childcare. Neither does J.D. Vance, who thinks that grandparents and aunts should look after children. She wants to reinstate the childcare tax credit. She wants to help small businesses instead of big corporations. So I think she can lead tonight. She can lead with her path for a new way forward and really bring a lot of people who have been disaffected, who really haven't voted the last few times. I think that she can excite them. History is going to be made this year. And North Carolina voted for Barack Obama in 2008. We're going to vote for Kamala Harris in 2024 and make history again.
Governor, let me ask you, in a recent interview, Harris seemed to shrug off some of the personal attacks that Donald Trump has levied her way, calling it from the playbook of the past. Will she have to take on these things more directly in this debate setting tonight?
Well, it'll be interesting to see that in the middle of all of his word salads and lies, which we know are coming, whether he hurls insults at her while she's there in person. We'll see if he does. I suspect that she will brush them off pretty quickly and head into making sure she's putting meat on the bones of her policy, telling the country about the direction that she wants to take it, making sure that we shore up the middle class, making sure that the tax breaks go to the middle class and not the billionaire friends of Donald Trump. She's going to distinguish herself from Donald Trump in a strong way. And I think those insults, whether they come or not on the stage, she'll go right past them and make sure she's sticking to the issues that the American people will care about.
You know, it's interesting you say that because today on debate day, the Harris campaign released an ad seeming to want to goad Donald Trump with a clip from the convention. Let me roll you a little portion of this.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems.
Oh, big crowd. Oh, the crowd.
Weird obsession with crowd sizes.
Interesting, because everybody says they want to talk about policy, and then everyone kind of gets down in the dirt a little bit, and that turns voters off. So why do you?
I didn't even watch the RNC. They mentioned Trump name 21 times. They all struggle from Trump derangement syndrome.
And a lot of them about her policies and her backgrounds. Her background. She's not going to let this distract her. There, she's not going to take any crap from Donald Trump on that stage today. She is a prosecutor, and she's going to make sure that she gets her points across. But she's not going to be distracted by the name calling. I think it is turning off America, and it may be one of the reasons why the Harris campaign chose to run such an ad, reminding people that this is really what Donald Trump is all about. It's all about him and his narcissism, and every decision that he makes comes back to whether it will advantage him or not. And when Kamala Harris talks about how she gets up every morning wanting to do good things for the American people, I think people will see the real difference. This is a race about character, too. This is a race about the soul of our country, and people are going to be making that decision. This debate will be a time tonight to to make some decisions for people. I'm hoping we can bring in people who haven't been involved in the process that much in the past. More than half of our volunteers the first couple of weeks in North Carolina were first-time volunteers. We've got a lot of first-time donors to the campaign. You can go to KamalaHarris.com and contribute to the campaign. So we're excited. We think tonight will be a big night. We'll see what happens.
All right. Governor, thanks so much for spending time with us this evening. We appreciate it. We're going to get back to politics in a second, but we do have some breaking news in the South we're following, where Francine just strengthened into a Category 1 hurricane. That storm barreling toward Texas and Louisiana with life-threatening conditions expected along the Gulf Coast. Francine expected to make landfall tomorrow with the New Orleans metro area under a hurricane watch. Al Roker is tracking the storm. Al, what can we expect?
Well, we are looking for some really serious weather over the next 48 hours along the Gulf. Right now, it's 350 miles southwest of Morgan City, Louisiana, 75-mile-per-hour wind, so it's just barely a Category 1. But we're not worrying about the categories. We're worrying about the impacts. We're talking about hurricane warnings right now throughout much of Louisiana. New Orleans under a hurricane watch. Tomorrow, sometime around 5, 6 o'clock, we're expecting the worst conditions around 6 till Thursday at 2 a.m. in New Orleans. What we're expecting, 3 to 6 inches of rain or more, 60-mile-per-hour winds, and isolated tornadoes as well. Now, as the system pushes onshore, and this is what we're talking about, don't worry about categories. Impacts. Baton Rouge could see 95-mile-per-hour wind gusts. At these winds, we're looking at power outages, damage to homes, and with that wind, the dangers. This is where the most deadly effect is. The storm surge from central Louisiana to Grand Isle, about 10 feet of surge, 4 to 7 feet as you move further to the east, 3 to 5 feet in New Orleans, and heavy rain. This area has already seen a lot of rain in the last 7 days. We're going to get anywhere from 2 to 4 inches per hour falling. That means more likely we're going to be seeing very severe flooding and storm totals, guys, upwards of 12 inches, especially along the southern Gulf. But as we get into the Mississippi River Valley, 3 to 5 inches as well possible. The only silver lining there is that the water levels for the Mississippi are really down. They're worried about shipping, so this could help. But those folks right along the Gulf are in harm's way.
We'll see you bright early tomorrow, Al.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, on the Today Show. Thank you.
And we're going to take a short break here, but still ahead tonight, we'll show you the biggest debate moments of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump as they gear up to debate each other and meet in person for the very first time. That's coming up right after this.
Sitting down and relaxing.
talking possibly 1 trillion galaxies.
Yes.
That is a number that is just so hard to compute.
Whether it's the moon, whether it's Mars, it feels like we are on the cusp of something big.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is our special coverage of tonight's presidential debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. We will bring that debate to you live in its entirety once it begins.
And a lot has been made of this. The first time these two candidates have appeared on the same stage. They have never debated each other before tonight, and they've never even met. So what can we expect? We have a closer look at their biggest moments from past debates and what that could tell us about what we could see tonight.
Our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson's been walking down memory lane with the archive tape. Hi, Hallie.
And it is quite a fascinating walk, Savannah and Lester, because yes, you said it, their first meeting ever, their first debate ever, but it is not the first time that either has stepped on a debate stage, period, with some of the most memorable moments from the past, perhaps providing some clues for tonight.
Tonight, the first face-off between two candidates with different prep, different styles, and different experience. For Vice President Harris, her first time stepping into this kind of general election spotlight after memorable moments in primary and VP debates.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
Harris, no stranger to the stage from early in.
Pence mopped the floor with her back in that VP debate, that they had to cancel the second presidential debate between Biden and Trump.
So there's a clear difference between the candidates in this race. And I think the voters will make that decision.
Allies point to Harris's past as a prosecutor and arguing her experience helps shape sharp arguments.
Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked.
And Harris drawing on her personal background, like in this key exchange in the 2020 primary with her future boss.
You also worked with them to oppose busing. And you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
But Harris has had to play defense, too, like in another debate that cycle, accused of hypocrisy for shifting to a more progressive position in a crowded primary.
There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
For his part, Mr. Trump has more debate experience as a presidential nominee, 6 in all, most recently in June, a showdown that ultimately ended President Biden's presidential run.
We finally beat Medicare. Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
Their first ever debate in 2020, notable just as much for what Mr. Trump didn't say when asked if he'd condemn white supremacists.
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White
Proud Boys.
supremacists and Proud
Boys. Stand back and stand by.
Then candidate Trump's first debate against Hillary Clinton in 2016 still holds the record for the most watched ever, 84 million viewers. At later face-offs, the two sparring over foreign policy and Russian Vladimir Putin.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
Mr. Trump memorably looming behind his opponent on stage. At other points, delivering personal attacks.
Such a nasty woman.
And earlier in the Republican primaries, responding to a crass insult about the size of his hands.
Look at those hands. Are they small hands? I guarantee you there's no problem.
Now, tonight, Vice President Harris hoping to make good on past pledges.
I'd wipe the floor with him.
But according to the rules of this debate, it's former President Trump who will get the last word.
We're going to make it great again.
Now, some of those moments that you just saw may be mitigated by the rules we've been talking about at tonight's debate. Think about those mics muted when it's not each candidate's turn to speak. That may cut down on some of that overtalk or interruptions, if you will. There's also, of course, the rule that each candidate must stay behind their microphone. No stage wandering a la 2016. Lester, Savannah?
All right. Thanks so much, Hallie. For more on what we can expect from both candidates tonight, let's bring in President Biden's former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and Donald Trump's former Deputy White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. Good to have both of you here today. Jen, let me start with you. I think it's fair to say a lot of Democrats were rattled by those latest New York Times Siena poll numbers. Is part of the vice president's mission and task tonight to reassure Democratic voters that all is well?
I think it's part of the mission, but the other part of the mission is to think about that 28% in that same poll of people who want more information about her. So what's tricky about this, Lester, if you're the vice president, is a lot of Democrats out there have been waiting for somebody to eviscerate Donald Trump. They might, progressive Democrats and other Democrats who might be rooting for that. That is not the right strategy for the totality of this debate, because that 28% who want more information, who want to know more about her positions, that may not be what they're looking for.
She has the most to gain or lose because she has 30% roughly of the electorate that's still curious. Hogan, as I bring you in here, Donald Trump, I mean, for better or for worse, it's a very calcified, set in stone opinion that people have. Some love him, some do not love him. So what is his number one job tonight?
I think he's going to try and do is make people remember his record while he was president. And then what Kamala Harris is going to try and do is make people forget her record as vice president. People remember they could afford gas and groceries just a few short years ago. There weren't wars breaking out all over the world. We had a rational, sane southern border policy. So he's got to remind people of that. He's got to expose her radical record at the same time, but he needs to stay on message. He needs to focus on what the American people care about every single day and not run rabbit. There's no doubt she's going to have those canned lines ready to go, those contrived stories like she did in the package that you guys just played. Look, she called Joe Biden a racist on a debate stage, had merchandise ready to go, but she couldn't parlay that into anything positive for her campaign. She'll do that to Donald Trump tonight. The question becomes, will he follow her down that trail, or will he stick to the points that the American people care about most?
And Jen, does the vice president have to have things that she wants to remind the public about in terms of history?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the challenges for her is that every candidate wants to be the change candidate, right? You have a former president and a sitting vice president, so they're not the natural change candidates. She has to figure out on this debate stage how she can both embrace part of her record that people may like and also build on it and tell people that she's going to do something different. That is very tricky.
Sounds like you're saying she has a higher bar.
She does have a higher bar. I think there's higher expectations for her. I will say, I'm not sure that looking in the past, that's not what the public is really looking for. We know that from every election ever. People want a forward-looking plan and vision. So the other part of what she needs to do is tell people exactly what she's going to do.
Do you think she's made it unnecessarily hard on herself in this particular moment? Because she hasn't done very much off the cuff, unscripted. She did one interview since being elevated to the top of the ticket. Now it's this night. Does that just ratchet up the stakes when they don't ratchet it up any higher?
I actually think the biggest challenge for her is that she's never met him before or interacted with him before. And she is a studious, thorough prepper, which I think is good no matter what political party you're from. That's a good thing. But it also means you have to let go of those briefing books and be in the moment. Donald Trump is not a standard, traditional policy debating candidate. So it requires a different muscle. And I think she's never practiced that muscle before. And that's the piece that I think is going to be challenging.
Respond. We've got a question for you.
Just quickly. It's interesting because you do want to look in the future. There's no doubt about that. The problem with Kamala Harris is every time she starts to say, I promise you I will. On day one, I'm going to. Donald Trump can just say, but you're the sitting vice president right now. Either you can't do those things or you won't. Either way, I don't think the American people are going to buy it.
You both know him very well. Lara Trump just told us a few moments ago he's going to be calm, cool, and collected. Raise your hand if you think he will be.
Like always.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He's always calm.
Is that the worst thing that could happen to Kamala Harris?
If he is calm, cool, and collected, I'm not sure it's the worst thing, but I think she is going to hopefully not take the bait. I think the Clinton advice is good advice to her. Don't take the bait. Try to bait him a little bit. That would be a win for her.
All right. Hogan and Jen, thank you very much. Both veterans of the White House. Coming up, we've got Steve Kornacki here to break down where this race stands. Spoiler alert, it's very, very tight, and how tonight's debate could shake things up. We're back right after this.
One thing I've noticed out of all the Trump debate I've watched, it's always like stand-up debates. He never had like a sit-down debate like Kamala Harris had with Mike Pence, or a sit-down debate when Barack Obama ran against Mitt Romney. Like they had like some sit-down debates, even with John McCain back when he ran the first time. You know, that's what I've noticed about, Trump. It's always like stand-up debates where both candidates stand up. yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What is going to happen now?
Going back and forth because
This is it, right?
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Welcome back to our special coverage of tonight's presidential debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. We'll be bringing you debate live when it begins in less than 25 minutes.
And tonight will be a critical moment, and it could shake up what many see as a tight race, a deadlock race with less than 2 months to go before Election Day.
Steve Kornacki is with us tonight at the big board to break it all down. Where's this going?
Yeah, I mean, close. And let's put this in some perspective here. What you're looking at is the average of all of the major national polls that are out there right now. This is a running average we keep. Harris at a 47-45 for Trump. 2-point lead there for Harris. Obviously, Democrats like that, but some context for that. First of all, there's this. Donald Trump has run from behind both previous times he ran for president. At this same point, 4 years ago in our average, Donald Trump was trailing Joe Biden by 7.8 points. And at the same point in 2016 in our poll average, Trump was trailing Hillary Clinton by 4.5 points. Now it's only 2. So yeah, Trump's behind, but this is closer than he's been in the polling in previous elections. And there's also this. Remember in 2016, Trump lost the national popular vote to Clinton, won in the Electoral College. In 2020, Trump lost the popular vote by a wide margin to Joe Biden, almost won in the Electoral College. Is there going to be a gap like that again that works to Trump's favor, an Electoral College advantage? That's what you think about when you look at this, the 7 core battleground states. And again, poll average here, the average of the major polls in those states right now. And you see the headline, obviously, these are very close margins. Look, Harris, 1/10 of 1 point in the North Carolina average right now. Trump by 0.5 point in Georgia. These are very, very close. Although you take a look and you see one here that's a little different. That's Wisconsin. Harris on average just over 4 points ahead right now. This was, keep in mind, Wisconsin, the source of the single biggest polling miss in 2020. It had Joe Biden well ahead, nearly 10 points on average. He won the state by less than 1 point. The polling here was way off in 2016 as well. There was a pretty big miss in Michigan, too. States with large blue-collar white populations where Trump has run up very big numbers. The polls didn't sufficiently capture that in 16 and 20. Is that going to be different in 2024? Or is there more Trump support in some of these states than it appears in the polls? That's a major question to think about as you see more numbers out. And then you just see in this come right here, the electoral votes. Again, 7 core battleground states. Where's tonight's debate? It is in the state that is first among equals when it comes to battleground states. 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania, more than any other. What does that mean functionally? If you're one of these campaigns and you lose Pennsylvania, mathematically, if you want to offset that, you got to win at least 2 others to make up for the 19 that you're losing out on in Pennsylvania. This is the king of the battleground states.
Steve, not to bring it back memories, but weren't we here until Saturday, the week of the election, waiting for Pennsylvania?
That's right, 11:30 Saturday morning in 2020.
Oh my God, but who's counting, right? Okay, well, we shall see. Thank you. That sets it up very nicely for our next guest. What do voters want to hear from candidates tonight? These battleground voters, they're the deciders. Kate Snow is in Pennsylvania talking to those undecided swing voters. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Savannah. Yeah, we're at the Churchville Inn. It's a restaurant in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. That's right outside of Philadelphia. This is a county that really could be pivotal in the state of Pennsylvania. And as Steve was just saying, it could be pivotal. Pennsylvania, as it goes, could be pivotal for the whole election. So we gathered 3 voters with me. They are all undecided voters. Each one of you is registered differently. We have Lynn Kelleher, who's a registered Republican and a realtor here in town. We have Hannah Reed, an independent, a mom of 3. And then we have Andrew Wallace, who's registered Democrat and owns this place, by the way, the owner of the restaurant. What's interesting, though, is you all cannot decide. And Lynn, you told us that you find Trump, I forget your word, reprehensible. You really don't like the guy, but you find Harris, you said that you don't understand what she stands for. She needs to explain. What are you looking for tonight?
For me, the election is a decision between economics and morals. I like some of Trump's economic policies.
Yeah.
I find him I abhor him, quite frankly.
Because of his morals.
Because of his morals or lack thereof. But she, I think, is talking a lot of fluff. She hasn't said anything substantive. I don't know that she has the experience or the wherewithal to lead this country out of the economic situation that we're in.
I'm going to note all three of you voted for Trump in 2016 and then changed in 2020. Hannah, let me go to you. You said you're very frustrated going into this debate. Why?
Because the election itself is no longer about policies. It's no longer about the real issues in this country, like the economics or the inflation.
You don't like the name calling.
The name calling. I mean, the back and forth. It's about who can get one over on the other, to the point that we are not pushing policies through just because the person that put it through was from another party.
And Andrew, let me ask you about your issues, because we were talking earlier. You like some of the things. You're really big on policies that Trump supports, and then you're also really big on policies that Harris supports. You don't know what you're going to do. So what do you need to hear tonight?
I feel left behind by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, Harris received 0 votes. I would have liked to have a say in the primary, and they didn't give me that. I feel that they think that they know what's best for me. Harris hasn't said anything. Harris's policies, a lot of them, have just been stolen from Trump. Taxes on tips, putting up the border wall. She's had said absolutely nothing of her own with her own ideas. So I'm waiting to see anything from her that is an original idea and not stolen from the other candidate.
All right, guys, we're going to watch this debate together. And Savannah, Lester, we will certainly report back on sort of what the reactions are here in the room. It's an instant focus group.
Yeah, some important voices to hear. Kate, thanks very much. Let me bring in 2 experts at debate preparation. Greg Craig served as White House counsel in the Obama administration. He prepped John Kerry by playing George W. Bush. And Judd Gregg is a former senator from New Hampshire who prepped George W. Bush by playing John Kerry. And Senator, let me begin with you. You know, the candidates,
We're sort of hitting you with a tongue tie there.
Yes, it's not easy. The Harris folks really want to put forth her and introduce her to people who don't know a lot about her right now. Is this a good time for any candidate to change who they are, who the viewers and voters perceive them to be?
People can't change themselves. Really, these debates turn on a few things, I think. First is your mannerisms, and especially when you have a split screen. If you'll remember when George Bush the first was in the debate, he looked at his watch, and that affected the campaign significantly. And then Al Gore rolled his eyes and made all sorts of facial disparaging types of movements. And then, of course, in the last debate, it was President Biden just looking like he wasn't there. So the physical activity on the stage is really critical, and you've got to act like you're a serious person in a serious event. Secondly, you've got to be substantive. This is about the presidency of the United States. People expect substance. They don't expect gamesmanship. And third, a little self-deprecating humor doesn't work. That doesn't hurt. It's nice to know that the person can connect with you because they are willing to talk about themselves in a humorous way. And so those 3 elements are really critical to defining an individual and whether they connect with the audience. But you can't change yourself just for a debate. That's impossible.
Well, it's fun to talk to both of you because you've had this rare opportunity to actually play the opposing candidate. So we know you from politics, but apparently you have acting chops as well. Greg, as I turn to you, you helped President Obama and I think Senator Kerry as well. So if you were advising Kamala Harris, what would you tell her to do? Because obviously Donald Trump is an opponent unlike any other.
I agree with that. I think on the issue of substance and policy, she's just going to be fine. She's disciplined. She's hardworking. Her real challenge, I think, is managing Trump, because whereas Vice President Harris is the captain and quarterback of Team Normal, former President Trump is really the 4-star general of Team Crazy, and you can't really guess or predict exactly what he's going to be saying or doing. It's going to be a stream of consciousness. There's going to be non sequiturs. There's going to be one falsehood after another. So I'm going to be interested in finding out how she manages to deal with him. I think he's likely to get under her skin more than she's likely to get under his skin. And is she going to lose it? She would probably have every right to get angry or emotional or lecture him. But I think if she manages this guy in this debate, she'll be president of the United States.
Senator Craig and Greg Craig, good to have both of you with us.
Not easy, right?
Not easy at all, but nice to have your perspective. Speaking of an interesting perspective, there's only two people sitting at this desk right now who have actually moderated general election debates, which I would like to say seems like the most thankless job in America. But you both survived. We got Kristen Welker here. Hallie's done some primary debates.
I'm out of my
Me
league.
too.
I
No,
know.
but this is next level. Lester, first of all, without triggering you, what do you remember about doing the debate in 2016?
I remember how lonely it felt because we were, when both of us did it, was under the auspices of the Presidential Debate Commission. You're a solo out there. You've got your two in this giant room full of people, and there were estimates of 100 million people watching. At the same time, it's such a privilege to do things like this, but you're getting people are, leading up to it, or is he going to fact check you? Every time you turn on cable TV, they're talking about you and what they think you're going to do or what you're thinking. I don't know if Kristen felt the same thing, but I think of David and Lindsay tonight. It's not an easy task.
Oh, it's definitely not. And when you talk about feeling lonely, part of that is because there's no one in your ear telling you or giving you editorial backup. Look, I think there's no greater weight than the moments before heading into a general election debate, because you are asking questions on behalf of the people who Kate was just interviewing, on behalf of the American people. So you want the questions to be understandable, digestible, not coming from Washington and politics, but from a place of people's dining room tables. And the best thing that you can say about a moderator is that you don't remember who moderated.
Well, I was going to say, and since it's over, I can say these can make a career, they can break a career. And a lot of times the criticism is quite harsh for a moderator who does fact check in real time. I can think of a moderator who got in trouble for that. And for moderators who don't, it's sort of darned if you do, darned if you don't.
I think the way to deal with that is to ask follow-up questions, make sure you're getting answers to the questions that you ask.
It's also a question for the candidates. And there is a question of how much tonight, as we bring it back to what we're going to see in just about 11 minutes from now, is how much will Vice President Harris fact check former President Trump and vice versa. Although it is clear, we know from past debates that the former president does say things that are not true on this stage. I've talked to people in her orbit who say if she spent the night fact checking, in their view, she'd never get anything else in. So she's got to pick her moments in that space. We're also seeing, even as we've been on the air tonight, former President Trump already, his campaign, his team, kind of working the refs here already, preemptively going after the moderators. It's always a factor.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's not terribly recent, but I remember it's in the last 10, 15 years, it's become a lot more common to attack the moderator. I remember when you would never see the candidates go out and go after the moderator. I remember Newt Gingrich doing it in a Republican primary, I think in 2016 or something like that. And that was different.
Well, two things. You've got to feel the room, and it took me several minutes to feel the room temperature of the candidates. The other thing is, having done a lot of debates, including a presidential debate, I swore a long time ago I would never publicly judge a debate moderator.
That's right.
It is an incredibly difficult job, and my hat's off to anyone who has done it.
Absolutely. And you try to tune out any criticism that you might be getting heading into the big night.
But you know exactly what their stomachs feel like.
I
10
sure
minutes
do.
away from the debate now.
I'm starting to feel
I know, having moments of feeling for them.
Thanks for all this. This was great. We'll take a break. We're less than 10 minutes away from the big moment as Kamala Harris and Donald Trump get ready to face off and meet for the first time ever. I hope you can stay with us. It's going to be quite a night.
Oh, hold on, I made a mistake. My bad.
Slam, bust the dialect, come the man in command, come flow with the sounds of the mighty.
Oh, that often with Donald Trump, that's performance. But I'll tell you that in his 2016 prep, he was serious about getting ready for Hillary Clinton. In his 2020 debate prep, he was completely unserious about getting ready for Joe Biden. I think performances in both those debates reflected that approach.
All right, Chris Christie, you'll be watching with us. Martha?
And we have about 6 minutes left before the debate. So let's bring in Donna Brazil, formerly of the DNC, and Reince Priebus, the RNC. Welcome to both of you. And Donna, let's start with you. You have said that Kamala Harris has to own the future, but she also has to own the past. So how does she do this?
It's quite easy. Because I do believe that in talking about the future, you draw from your past. You draw from your past experiences. She draws from how she was raised, the values that was instilled in her as a young lady. Look, she is steady on her feet, still in her resolve. And tonight she should talk to the American people, sit in their living rooms, go to their kitchen table and say, look, I have some ideas that I want to share with you. There's so much that we have done together over the last 4 years, but here's what I think we can do together over the next 4 years. Be positive in her approach and really remind American people that we don't want to go to the chaos and the confusion, the disaster that made the American people go out in droves. And
That woman, she used to work at Fox News. I'm familiar with her.
Americans, I want a strong and secure, and here's the plan that I want to share with you tonight.
And Donna, I of course meant Biden. She has to own up to the Biden administration's any mistakes they made too, and Donald Trump is going to go after her on that.
You know, Martha, they made mistakes. Donald Trump and Mr. Pence made mistakes. But you know what? If we focus on our mistakes, we won't focus on all of the good things that we could do together as Americans. I do believe there's something to say about people now able to work. The people who can buy their insulin without paying over $1,000, $35. There's so much good that she can talk about from the visits that she's made to small towns across this country, large cities across the country. Bring us together. The American people want to be led into the future, not dragged back to another era.
And Reince, I want your thoughts on, you've also prepped Donald Trump for debates back in 2016, I believe. What Donald Trump do you think we'll see tonight? Can he be disciplined about talking about policies and what kind of president he will be?
Well, he certainly can be. I mean, the reality is Donald Trump doesn't have a lot to lose tonight. I mean, his support has always been almost unmovable. So the second piece is the honeymoon, I think, is over for Kamala Harris. And you all kind of touched on it with Donna. Kamala Harris has to answer for the state of the economy that she took a role in the Biden administration, the border, her past positions on decriminalizing the border, decriminalizing certain drugs, what her role was in Afghanistan. So really, the spotlight is on Kamala Harris tonight because she played a role in the Biden administration. She wants to act like she's not an incumbent. So this is where the focus is going to be. And she's got a lot to answer for tonight. And I think that's where Donald Trump's focus will be and where it actually should be tonight.
Well, one of the things he wants to do is have female voters look at him. How does he attract female voters after saying things about Kamala Harris? And we'll see how he pronounces that tonight. Things he said about Kamala Harris, that she's dumb as a rock. That's not really going to attract female voters, is it?
Yeah, no, it won't. But I also think that just like he did in the first debate against Joe Biden, I think the formula here is to constantly tie Kamala Harris to the Biden administration, which is where Trump is winning against her on the economy, inflation, and all these other problems that we're having, and then sit back and let her talk. Let her explain herself, her past positions, current positions. How does she feel about how Biden has done on the, how does she feel about the border? Well, then turn it over and let her talk.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us tonight, Donna and Reince. We're all staying tuned. Can't wait.
And I have to say, as we are just a couple of less than 2 minutes away, this such an extraordinary moment, and especially, Rachel, when you consider that.
One thing I want to make is in 2020, Trump, I believe, according to exit poll, won like 43% of women's votes. So it's like he's going to be fine with women.
As well, or does he stick to the issue? Look, this is the largest audience they're likely going to have in this race. It will be interesting to see if Harris can make clear the stark choice before voters. And where does she decide to land her punches? She can punch hard. Can she do that while rising above the needling coming her way? But first and foremost, are we going to see a handshake when the two of them meet for the first time?
We didn't back in 2016 when I did that debate. We'll stand by to see that tonight. But the first time, side to side, together.
And I have my doubts that we're going to see that handshake, but what we are going to see is a spirited debate, and perhaps the most constant general election debate we have ever seen, because almost certainly going to be the last one. So with the stakes so high, the presidential debate just moments away, we have the entire news division keeping an eye on everything. We are going to be fact-checking on our live blog. It's all going to be happening right here. The debate now just 10 seconds away, and we will be back with our post-game show as soon as it's over. We are going to toss it right now to David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
I doubt if we're going to have an handshake because they don't like each other. Democrats and Republicans usually don't like each other, but there can be some fighting within Republicans. But for the most part, people just don't like Trump, But that's okay.
Up against a new opponent.
Candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special. The consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face. Historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate. Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We're going to get to immigration, border security during this debate, but I would like the Vice President to respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump, will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was for people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father is professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming criminals. That's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for men and their reproductive rights. In the state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban. You initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really at it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion.
Your vice presidential pick is horrible too. You should have chosen Vivek.
Execution after birth. It's an execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her
Why-
that
why
question?
don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and pledge to you that I.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's busing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. Not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News reached out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence. Vice President Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the public, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him, so he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far.
Yeah.
In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Yeah.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their vigilant statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse
President
me,
Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities.
Wow.
They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions.
Yeah.
And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big solar. 400, 500 acres of desert soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no
Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing.
Fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election. That was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, "We won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote." Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as vice president of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I
up.
think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately. And the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation. And now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 160 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
One thing I will say is, in regard to Ashley Babbitt that was shot, I mean, she was part of the mob that tried to storm the Capitol, you know, to try to go along with the coup to stop the certification of the vote. So that's why the officer shot him. And Trump did have a really good rebuttal in terms of what happened in Black Lives Matters and all the rioting and looting that we saw in 2020. I think Kamala was strong in abortion. And that's what I pretty much have to say. And also, when they started, you know, the Trump administration did, set up the Biden administration for success because because they administered the vaccine at a record time. They did Operation Warp Speed. So the economy was going to bounce back regardless whether it's Biden or Trump that was taking office, because they brought back 11 million jobs out of the 22 million they lost because of the pandemic. So they were going to have a bounce back regardless who takes the office. And the election was stolen. And it is the truth. Trump won 2004 97 county. How can Biden win an election where, he won way less county than Trump? Biden won way less county than the two-time Obama ran for election in 2008 and 2012. Obama won like 600 counties. Trump won like 2,497 counties. And when you get 75% of the primary votes guaranteed to win re-election, and he got 94%, he was breaking record turnout in primary that didn't even matter. So the election was stolen. And if he wins in November, we should have a audit in the 2020 election to prove that, no, I actually did win this election, that they used the COVID to steal it from me. Like in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. We need to hack one of those machines that allegedly switch votes. And Biden has been a plagiarist. I mean, he had to end his 1988 presidential run because he was caught plagiarizing. Even Mike Pence, I remember one of the debate with Kamala Harris in 2020, when he looked at the Biden plan to combat COVID, he even said, it looks like plagiarism. So, Ashley Babbitt, yes, it was bad that she was shot, but she was part of the mob that tried to storm the Capitol, and the police officer shot her. Even though, he did win the election.
Most watched newscast in America.
We're part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from.
Hi, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismail, David.
ABC's Wars Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
Okay, let's get back to the debate.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome to this historic ABC. presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue. I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin? And would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a ship with is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier. Now, please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander in chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why this picture of mouse? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they did do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said, going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just need
gonna move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan? And can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up and voted for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a mistake. At number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
Debate. I like the debate.
Baywatch is a fantasy.
Baywatch was sexy.
That's just not good. Keep it real, people. Keep it juicy.
The one thing I will say is, 3 years before COVID, you know, when the Trump administration cut taxes, rolled back regulation, they brought over 500,000 manufacturing jobs. And yes, and then COVID happened, and then, you know, the economy was bad.
Brand on everything so customers can notice you, remember you, fall in love with you. If you need it, we print it with 25% off for new customers at Vistaprint.com.
The season finale is upon us!
Dog food in my fridge?
It's not dog food. It's fresh pick. Real meat, real veggies.
For thy beast?
There's always a betrayal in the finale.
Wait, we're in an Airheads commercial. Want to skip it?
Skip.
Stressed out? Time to refresh your rhythm with Trident. Trident Gum, the fresh chew to refresh your rhythm.
Central on ABC. Nominations, mornings, evenings, late night, weekends, streaming 24/7, 40 Emmy nominations. Thank you for making ABC News America's #1 news.
Get ready, America, every Friday.
The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff.
Yes!
And save big time, too.
The right stuff.
Fridays on GMA. You're going to
This is Impact by Nightline.
Are you kidding me? My sense was that everybody around him was afraid of him.
Brittany describes having a secret abortion that not even her family knew about.
What's going on with Kate?
What is the relationship like between Harry and William today?
What did people start to say? You look great. Are you on Ozempic?
I told the kids, I said, I'm not even gonna let you eat breakfast until you get your chores done. She talks about tough love and harsh punishment. No, it's abuse.
I think Scott Peterson murdered his wife and his child. Prove me wrong.
Do you feel the church accepted abuse?
Yep, that's him.
Yep. Ready? Does your church protect sexual predators?
How do you top the most watched season yet?
Fabulous.
It's a bit erotic, a bit exotic. You have no idea.
Impact by Nightline. The all-new season premieres this September, only on Hulu.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different. If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you? I hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense? Andrew?
I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything. Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium. 1985? I think we could have. Let's go.
We are heading into the unknown.
Oh my gosh.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
Reporting from the floor of the Republican National Convention, I'm Rachel Scott. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.